We're getting set up, getting settled in. If you guys just bear with me for just a minute, we're going to get our day started here. So, we are going to be in Leviticus 18 this morning. And as we get going, as you guys kind of fill the room, we are going to get started in Leviticus 18 today. So, the thing that I know about today, I want you to think about this in your everyday life. Nobody is making you hustle today, okay? Nobody has a deadline placed forth in front of you. There's no fire to put out. Sometimes I even think it's like nobody's even waiting on you, but for some reason, you're still operating in that way. Like your body never got the memo to just like slow down, like things calm down on their own. There's a reason why we do that, okay? The same reason that people who had just gotten free from forced labor kept looking back at the place that hurt them. These people were out and no one was chasing them anymore. Okay, but their old way of working, it doesn't always leave just because your situation changed. A lot of times it just stays ingrained in you, like in how you move through the day. I think how you move through it even way after you actually needed to operate in that way. You can be completely free and still be working like you're not. So, good morning as you all come in. Does my audio and everything sound okay? I honestly didn't get a chance to test. Good morning as you all come in. And as you join, I invite you to stay with us because we are going to be in Leviticus 18 today. Okay, good. I'm so glad it sounds good. I was trying to test before I came in and it was just taking forever. And I was like, just never mind. I can't keep you waiting. So before we get started, I'm going to start off with our question as you guys are arriving into the room. We're going to do this again on a scale of 1 to 10. How much of your peace today is dependent on tomorrow going exactly as planned? 1 being like not at all, or 10 being, yeah, everything needs to go as planned. What would that look like for you? Scale of 1 to 10, how much of your peace today depends on tomorrow going exactly as planned? 1 being, it's not a big deal, or 10 being, yeah, it's a really big deal. Okay, it's relevant to where we're going. Every question I ask you, for the most part, is very relevant to where we're going to be at. 1, that's good. A lot of 1s, 4s. I want you to think about this too, okay, as we're kind of getting settled in. What's happening with Egypt, where we're going to be going in Leviticus 18? What's going underneath what's happening with Egypt is kind of awful, okay? It was predictable, and they knew exactly what kept them alive in this situation. Freedom doesn't necessarily always come with a guarantee. Like, nobody hands you a manual for what's enough once nobody forces you anymore. Like, you just kind of keep operating in that same mentality. You keep going back to that same mindset. A lot of times it's not about the work. It's about you kind of like picking the hard that you already know how to survive over the hard that you have when you feel like you're just so tired. Okay. So I want you to think about this. Like, think about it in this way. I want you to think about that number that I asked you on a scale of 1 to 10. And I'll ask some of you guys again as you're coming into the room. How much of your peace today depends on tomorrow going exactly as you envision it? Maybe you're like me and you have sports, like baseball games, your kids' sports and stuff, or maybe you have an event that's planned. Maybe you have a family gathering. How much of your peace depends on tomorrow going exactly as planned? So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not worried about it at all, I'm just going to let it be what it is, or 10 being like, I definitely need it to go as planned tomorrow. As we're doing that, I'm curious, what does your weekend look like? Do you guys have anything planned? Anything exciting? Or just anything at all? Even if it's just rest. That should be like a big one. So, We're going to be in Leviticus 18 today. I do these Bible studies every Monday through Friday. Okay, I go live around 9 a.m. Central. I go verse by verse through scripture. We do it right here together. It's your birthday weekend. What day is your actual birthday? We need to take mental notes so that we can make sure that we wish you a happy birthday in a Discord chat. But please let us know what day it is, because we don't want it to go by without saying anything. You're going to the beach? I love that. Oh, wait. I think you put it in here. Good morning, Letty. It's Sunday. Okay. I will remember to tell you happy birthday. And I pray that you have a beautiful day. Do you have anything planned? And good morning as you all are coming in. We're just getting started in this study. My mic feels like it's 1,000 miles away, but I don't want to move it. And it feels very quiet. Can you guys even hear the music? It's so quiet today for some reason. All right, and my mouse doesn't want to work. It's being real fun today. Technology is being technology. So, as I'm getting settled, I want to know how your weekend is planned. Okay, the music is good. I had to turn it up. It sounded like it wasn't even on. Good morning as you all are coming in. It's a tiny bit blurry. What would be your plan A, Sandra? What is your plan A? What do you all have planned this weekend? Is it rest? Is it hanging out? We're just getting settled here in our Bible study today. Okay. I need to move my chair, so sorry if you hear all the noises. Promise it's just my chair. Okay. As you are coming into this Bible study, I want to give you a little bit of a preview into what these studies are. You don't even need to know anything about the Bible to be here. Okay, so if you are brand new, we want to welcome you in. If this is your first time being in this study, can you tell us good morning? Can you drop your name? We want to welcome you in. This is such a beautiful community. I didn't even know you had a stepson, Erica. That's exciting. Okay, you don't need to know anything about the Bible to be here. I go through scripture verse by verse, and I invite you in to study with us. I go live for about 2 hours. We're just focusing on Leviticus 18 today. We're going to sit in that. So, as we always do, we always open up our studies with prayer. So I invite you all to put your prayer requests in the chat. It can just be one word. And we're going to get settled into our study. Okay? We're going to get started here in just a second. We're going to be in Leviticus 18. And then I always invite you to put the name of oh my gosh, I'm so off today, you guys. I don't know why. I invite you to go ahead and nope, I said it the same exact way. If I could, I'd hit a reset button on my mind today. I don't know what is going on with me. As we pray today, I'm going to invite you to find one person here in the chat. You don't have to message them. Just as they put in their prayer request, just pray over them. All right? And I'm going to pray for myself, and I invite you guys to pray for me that my mind keeps up with today, because for some reason it's just lagging. I had my full cup of coffee. It's crazy. I don't know what's going on with me. All right? So, we're going to get into it. Heavenly Father, I thank you for today. Thank you for a beautiful Friday. Thank you for the opportunity for us to gather today over this live and hear your word. Please fill me with wisdom. Please slow me down when I need to be back on pace. Please don't let my mind rush ahead. I'm very excited about today, and that might be why. Please fill me with discernment and wisdom to accurately represent your word. Please fill the room. Fill the room with individuals who need to hear this word specifically, that maybe they've been operating in a way that is causing them to strive, to feel like they have to earn your love. Or if they feel like your word in Leviticus is just a book of rules, please allow them to see your heart today. Please let us be filled with more of who you are. Please decrease me and increase you, Father, so that they only see you. I pray that we have strength and wisdom. Please open up our eyes to see what you're laying out for us so intentionally in text. Please let us just sit still today. Please give us strength as we go into the weekend, and that plans that we have, Father, please let us just be flexible if they don't go according to the way that we envision them. Thank you for all you do in our lives, Father. I know you see each and every comment as it comes through. Thank you for being healer. Thank you for being provider. Thank you for being who you are, Father. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to get into Leviticus 18. That's where we're going to stay just for today. I'm not going to read any other chapters. Okay. I'm going to give you a recap of Leviticus 18. Before I do that, I did have another question for each and every one of you. I want you to pick what's most true for you right now. Okay, I'm going to invite you to put it in the comments. It's going to be 1, 2, or 3, all right? Pick what is most true for you. 1, I know exactly what to do and I'm exhausted doing it. Like I know exactly what's on my plate and I know exactly what needs to be done, but I'm exhausted thinking about it. So that's 1. Are you, where are you at today? Are you 2, I don't know what to do and it's driving me insane? Or are you 3, I know what to do and I'm scared to stop? Okay? What are you? 1, I know exactly what to do and I'm exhausted doing it. 2, I don't know what to do and it's driving me insane. Or 3, I don't know what to do and I'm scared, or I know what to do and I'm scared to stop. Okay? It's either 1, 2, or 3. And as you all are getting in, we are just getting started in Leviticus 18. If this is your first time being here, I welcome you in. I have a favor to ask each and every one of you. At the bottom left of your screen, there's that gold icon. Do you see a new option? For those of you that are a part of my lives, you'll know that this is new. But there should be an option in here that says, what has your business been growing from? Do you guys see that as a drop-down option? Can you let me know if that's in there? That is a new gift for every single one of you. You do, okay. So what that is I created this guide, and it is actually so relevant to today. This guide helps you to see the soil that your business has been growing from. Has it been growing from proving, striving, fear? So many things. I want you to go underneath the surface to see kind of what the soil, the foundation that your business has been growing from. Because sometimes when we can name it, it helps us to understand the reasons why we're operating in the ways that we are. So I invite you all to go get that. Now, I can't guarantee you that I set up my automations yesterday for it to be sent to you automatically. I can't guarantee that it's going to go through automatically, but I can guarantee you it will get sent to you at some point today. So I'm asking you as a favor, can you click on that? If you want it, you don't have to get it if you don't want it. But if you click on it, at some point during this live, will you let me know if you receive it to your email? Because I just want to make sure that the system is sending it out. And if it is, then I don't have to do anything else. But if it isn't, then I want to make sure I get it to each and every one of you. So that's my favor from all of you, or to all of you. And just let me know either way if you can, okay? And I'll try to remember to ask you again. But we're going to get into Leviticus 18. So I appreciate you all helping me. So I'm going to give you a recap of Leviticus 17 right before we get into 18. Because I want to talk about where we just came from yesterday, because it matters for where we're going to be today. And if any of you missed that, there's the replays in that same section at the bottom left of your screen. And good morning as you all are coming in. So Leviticus 17, it comes right after 7 chapters of instructions for priests. And it does something that sounds small, but it's actually massive. It says that no one gets to slaughter an animal wherever they feel like anymore. Every single animal has to be brought to the entrance of the tabernacle, and they have to do it in front of everyone, and then it's given to the priest. So if you have never read this before, that might sound kind of like a bureaucracy, but it's not, okay? Before this law, people could sacrifice privately in a field wherever they wanted, and there's evidence that some of that private sacrifice in that religion was actually going to goat demons. They were false gods posing as a harmless local custom, right? That's how it comes in, right? It usually comes in very subtle. We're usually very unaware of when it comes in, but it does. It kind of sneaks in and it looks like just a part of your everyday. God knows that. And what he's doing is he is closing a door. He can see that counterfeit, and he knows that if they try to put their time and their effort and their worship and their hope into something that is counterfeit, it's not going to do a single thing for them. So God is closing that door, and that worship, it stops being something that you do in private on your own terms. It stops being disconnected from the community, because it's very easy to twist it into something else. So this chapter also tells them that something that they've probably never heard stated this directly, that blood is life, okay? It doesn't represent life, it is the life. So in Hebrew, that word is the same word that's used for a living soul. That's why they're told never to eat it, okay? That's because the blood on the altar is what makes that atonement possible. To my moderators, you do an amazing job, but I'm asking you for this favor, as you always do. I can't assist you today because for some reason, my mouse is just not wanting to work. So I'm not going to be quick to muting people. So that is my favor. Normally I try to do my best to help all of you out, but it's just not cooperating today. So I just want to give you the heads up. You don't have to be super on it today, but just know that I'm not going to be able to be as handy in the chat today. So apologies for that. Okay, I just wanted to call that out right away before I forget. So this blood on the altar, it's what makes that atonement possible, that life was given for life, and God, he's protective over that, okay? He's protective over that connection to the point that it's even in how they handle an animal's blood in daily life, that becomes sacred. So the reason why I give you that portion of the recap is because it matters. It matters so much for what we're doing today. Because Leviticus 17, it just told them that life itself at the most physical level, it belongs to God. And it gets handled his way, not according to whatever normal around them. Okay, so Leviticus 18, it takes that exact same principle and moves it into the most intimate parts of a person's life. Okay, it's in their body, in their family. Okay, into their private, intimate moments that they have with other people. So, chapter 17, it says that your worship isn't yours to just freelance or do whatever you want to do with it. Chapter 18 says that your body isn't yours to just go and do whatever you want with it either. Now, stay with me as we read through this. There are going to be some parts of it just based on, it's very similar to Leviticus 15 in that I don't read it verbatim according to the text, just because we're on a social media platform. So I can't just say any and everything that I want to say according to the text. So I might modify things, but I invite you, if you don't have your Bible open, go back in and read it. Read Leviticus 18. Okay, so you understand some of the fullness of what some of these words actually are intended to be, because I'm going to be modifying them. Okay. I will read them in full because it's not as graphic as Leviticus 15, but both chapters, 17 and 18, they're actually, what they're doing is saying the same thing about two different rooms kind of in the same house. So if you're new here and this is your first time in Leviticus altogether, I want to give you a quick version of where we've been. This whole book is God teaching a brand new nation how to actually live near him. So that means that chapters 1 through 7 covered the offerings. And then chapters 8 through 10 covered how the priesthood gets set apart and what happens when that's treated very carelessly. And then chapters 11 through 15, they covered what makes a person clean or unclean in their daily life and their food and their skin conditions, even the fluids that came out of somebody's body, okay? Because nothing about ordinary life was outside of God's attention. Nothing about our day to day is outside of God's attention. So chapter 16, what that chapter did is it gave them the Day of Atonement. This is one day a year that a high priest could go to the most holy place. Like, it was the one day where he could go into the most holy place at all. He couldn't even set foot in it any other days of the year. God told him, you can't just come and go as you please anymore. Because you're encountering, this is the holy place where God's presence dwelled. So he didn't just have access to it whenever he pleased. Okay? This was the one day a year to make things right between God and the whole nation. And then in chapter 17, what we saw yesterday, that's what I just recapped. It closed that whole section by saying from here forward, worship happens my way, not whenever and however you decide. So what's happening here as we start in chapter 18, it actually picks up from there and it starts a brand new section of the book, okay? This is the section about how holiness shapes daily relationships, starting with the most private one there is. But as we go through this, I want you to think about this. I want you to see what this shows about God's heart, okay? What this shows us about God, even before we get into chapter 18, is that God does not separate the sacred from the physical the way we kind of do sometimes. Because I think a lot of times we tend to think that God cares about our spiritual life and he stays out of the practical, like the bodily, everyday stuff. Leviticus says the opposite. The entire book says the opposite of that. God cared enough about a goat's blood to give instructions for it. That is not a God who's only interested in the big spiritual moments of your life. That is a God who is present in the actual material of your days, down to the smallest detail. That's because none of it is neutral to him, and none of it is beneath his attention. Okay, so we're going to get into chapter 18 of Leviticus, and I'm going to read through verses 1 through 5. I'm in the New King James Version of Scripture. Again, I'm going to be modifying some of these things. I invite you to either follow along in your Bible, and if you don't have one, just listen. Okay, so then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, I am the Lord your God. According to the doings of the land of Egypt, where you dwelt, you shall not do. And according to the doings of the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you, you shall not do. Nor shall you walk in their ordinances. You shall observe my judgments and keep my ordinances to walk in them. I am the Lord your God. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, which if a man does, he shall live by them. I am the Lord. None of you shall approach one who is near of kin to him to uncover his barrenness, right? He doesn't have any clothes on. I am the Lord. The unclothed version of you, of your father, or of the unclothed version of your mother, you shall not uncover. She is your mother, and you shall not uncover her without clothes on, okay? The barrenness of your father's wife, you shall not uncover it. It is your father in his birthday suit, okay? I'm trying to be creative. Try to think of other ways to say this. Them in their natural state, okay, without clothes on. Of your sister, the daughter of your father, or the daughter of your mother, whether born at the same time or elsewhere, them being on that state, you shall not uncover, okay? I want you to understand this piece of it. God initially, he names two places. He names Egypt, which is behind them, and then Canaan, which is ahead of them, okay? And he says the same thing about both. Don't live like either one of them, okay? Don't live like either one of them. If you've never sat with this before, here's why this is actually a very strange thing to say. Egypt is where they just escaped from, okay? So you would think that leaving Egypt would automatically mean that they're free from Egypt's influence. But it doesn't work that way, okay? There are 400 years of them being in forced labor. 400 years is a very long time to absorb someone else's normal. And Canaan, right? They haven't arrived in Canaan yet. But God is naming a temptation that they're going to have before they've been exposed to it, because he knows exactly what's waiting for them in that place. In the Message translation, it puts verse 3 kind of like this. It says, don't do what they do in Egypt where you used to live, and don't do what they do in Canaan where I'm bringing you. Don't take on their way of life. So that word take on, like don't take on their way of life, it's doing something here, okay? It's not saying don't be tempted, because temptation isn't the sin here. It's saying don't absorb it as if it's yours. Don't absorb their ways as if they're yours. So psychologically, there's a piece underneath this, and I want to put it into plain words, okay? Our brains trust familiar pain before having a sense of familiar peace. That's how they operate, okay? That's just how people are built. So if you know exactly what to do to survive a bad situation, that situation starts to feel safer than a good situation that you've never navigated before. Because at least you know the rules. You know, based on like your past track record, that you're gonna know how to get out of it because now you have proof that you've survived it, right? But when you're operating in a new sense of norm, or when you're about to walk into a new space, your mind doesn't have a previous track record. So it's going into a place that it doesn't know. So when it's a situation you've never navigated, that doesn't feel safe. So Egypt, that was familiar to them, right? They knew Egypt. They had just come out of it. It was brutal. It was forced labor, right? It was watching your own children be under threat. Nobody's going to call that comfortable, but it was predictable for them. They knew exactly what to do to stay alive, right? You know exactly what to do in certain situations that you've navigated now, how to navigate them. Maybe you won't do it perfectly, but you have previous history with it. So what I want you to see here is that their freedom, it didn't come with a manual. And if you want to see how predictable Egypt's cruelty was, go back to Exodus 5, right? Right in the very beginning of the story, Pharaoh's response to Moses' first request is right there. And then in verse 7, he says, you shall no longer give the people straw to make brick as before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves, right? He made their situation even harder than what it needed to be. And then he said, and you shall lay on them the quota of bricks, which they've made before you, and you can't reduce it. So what he's doing in there is he's not saying no and leave it there. He makes it worse for them on purpose. He tells those masters to stop supplying straw for the bricks for the bricks that these people were required to make. But he keeps the exact same quota in place. So now what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to go find their own materials and still produce the same amount. And if they don't do it, then they're going to be hurt for it. They're going to be hurt for falling short. That's not random cruelty. That's a system. It's a very brutal one. But it's a system with very clear, knowledgeable rules. They know if they don't operate in this way, that's what's going to happen, right? Work this hard, produce this much, survive. That's what I mean by predictable. So they always knew exactly what was required of them to stay alive. To me, this is the proof that this pullback towards the known hard situations, that's very real for them. It's not just a theory. How many of you have done that? Right? I tell you this all the time, that your brain is always scanning for survival. It wants to stay where it's comfortable. So how many of you have navigated a really tough season and stepping out of it, you knew like, okay, that season was hard, but as you're navigating into this new one, sometimes you kind of want to go back to the old ways of operating because that's what's familiar to you. Like changing everything about yourself or changing everything and trying to figure out how to navigate that new season, that's scary to you because you don't know what it's going to require of you. Have you guys ever done that? You're like, I want to default. I want to just, you know what? That season was really hard, but at least I knew what to expect. So that's not just a theory, that's how we operate. So when you skip ahead to, when we go into Numbers chapter 14, this is going to be years later. This is after the sea has already been split, after they have already seen God provide water and food in the wilderness, right? These people are scared of what's ahead of them in the promised land, and their response isn't just complaining, it's an actual proposal. So in verse 4, it says, "Let us select a leader and return to Egypt." How crazy is that? They want to select a leader and go back to this place that was awful to them. They're offering to walk back into forced labor on purpose. This is with their eyes wide open. And that's because the fear of an unknown future, that outweighed the memory of an actual documented brutal past. Okay? That is not a small detail. That is that's the entire engine of this chapter. Okay? That's it playing out in real time. It is one generation before Leviticus 18 was even spoken. So if any of you have never read this before, there's something that I think will help the rest of this chapter make sense, okay? Israel didn't leave Egypt as a small group. Scripture actually describes them leaving as a whole nation. They are generations of people who have never known anything about forced labor. They had never known anything but forced labor. Okay? That means that the people that are standing here listening to this command, they didn't visit Egypt. Egypt raised them. Okay? Egypt taught them what marriage and family and what normal looked like, right? What was normal to do and not to do. So when God says, don't do what Egypt does, he's not asking them to reject a place. He's asking them to reject the only home that they've ever actually known. Imagine being told this entire way that you were raised, this entire way of seeing relationships and family, that isn't going to be the standard anymore. That's not a small ask. That's God asking someone to rebuild their sense of normal from the ground up. How many of you have ever gone through that? A massive identity shift where everything you thought you knew, God took and flipped it on its head. How many of you have ever had that? Also, I do have a question for you too. Does my voice, as my audio is coming out, does my mouth match my voice? Sometimes it lags and it looks weird. Does it match for you all? I know I just asked you 2 questions in one. It does match? Okay. If it doesn't, then I'm just going to move my mic. I might move my mic up. It's good now? It's okay. You know what? Give me 1 second. I'm just going to go like this. So that it doesn't because I think sometimes when people see that, they're like, whoops, I'm not. It's hard to watch, right? So I'll do it like this so that it's not super obvious. Because I was recording something yesterday in TikTok Studio and it was lagging so much. I don't know why it does that sometimes. It's very annoying. But as long as you can hear me, that's all that matters. So we all know what that feels like to have, because I asked you all, right? How many of you have had a massive identity shift where every single thing that you knew, God had to take it and flip it on its head? Your old ways of operating, they can't be that way anymore. I did. Actually, what we are covering today is so relevant to where I was at. It's hard. It's hard for us to rebuild our sense of normal from the ground up. That's a very big ask. It's hard and it's very uncomfortable. I'm going to ask you too, when you all went through that, did you ever find moments where you just wanted to go back to that old way of operating? Because it was just comfortable. You got used to it. It's hard to walk in obedience. So since since some of you are very familiar with that, I want you to put yourself there for a second, because a lot of times we look at what happened with the Israelites and we tend to think, what is wrong with them, right? Do any of you read the story of the Israelites, or sorry, the Hebrews, but the Israelites going through the wilderness and sometimes think like, why did they operate like that? I think if any of you have ever gone through that identity shift, you can relate to that the most. Because that's what that was for them. God took them out of forced labor to show them a new identity, the identity that he always intended for them. So when you put yourself in their shoes for a second, they are someone who just watched the sea split in half, okay? They are people who just watched an empire that enslaved them collapse behind them, right? And now they're being told that the very structure of everything that they just saw, from family to marriages to your own body, that also has to come apart too. So like some of what you know, like some of us know exactly what that feels like, not with Egypt, but in your own life, right? Sometimes that can be leaving an industry that treated you or trained you a certain way. For some of us, that's leaving a household that taught us like what love was supposed to look like. And it took us years to realize that it wasn't love at all. It was just familiar, right? I want you to notice what God does here, because he doesn't just say, don't do that. He tells them who is speaking. He says, I am the Lord your God, right? And that shows up twice in these 5 verses alone. And then by the end of the chapter, it says it around 15 times total. Isn't that incredible? I am the Lord your God. It shows up an additional 15 times after that by the end of this chapter. That is not a declaration. That's an actual argument, because God isn't asking them to be different for the sake of being different, like some kind of religious rebellion. He's telling them the reason not to copy Egypt or Canaan because of whose they are. He takes us and he reframes our identity, and he has to show us whose we are, right? A lot of teaching on being set apart, it turns into kind of like a personality trait, right? Stand out, be different, be bold. This chapter actually doesn't do that. It roots the entire thing in relationship. You don't refuse the old pattern because refusing is impressive, right? You refuse it because you belong to somebody who knows what's actually going to keep you alive. And that isn't the thing that you're used to. If I think about those of us that are in the room, especially myself, right? If I had to guess what God is saying to somebody listening to the specific part right now, I think this, right? I think there are some of you, man or woman, okay? I'll apply it to literally anybody. Oh, you know what? I realized I don't have my banner up, you guys. Why didn't you tell me that? That's the wrong banner. That's not the banner either. Where's it at? Right there. I didn't have my banner up. Didn't it feel like barren up there? I knew something was off. I could just feel it. Okay. Sorry, I'll get back to it. So if I had to guess, I feel like there's one of you in this room who has been calling something good, like good judgment, that's actually just familiarity. I knew the second I did that, see, now TikTok's pushing it out. Okay. A lot of us have been telling ourselves that we're being cautious. A lot of times we feel like we're being smart and we're staying grounded, when in reality, what we're doing, we're just doing the version of hard that we already know how to do, like how to survive, because that unknown, it terrifies us. I think it terrifies us sometimes more than the pain actually does. But you know what? I don't think that God is frustrated with you because of that. I think based on what I've seen in this text, God is doing exactly what he did for Israel here. Thank you, Auntie. He is naming it before you have to find out the hard way. I think that God is saying, I see two directions. I see the two directions pulling on you, that old normal behind you and this new normal in front of you. And neither one of those gets to write the story of who you are. God does. I think that if God were sitting across from any one of us this morning, I genuinely believe that he would say that you don't have to go back to prove that you can survive again. God already knows that we can survive it. That was never a question to him. I truly believe that the question more so that's being posed is whether you'll let God show you something better than survival. How many of you want God to show you something better than just surviving the day? Than feeling like you have to just go back to that old way of operating because the new feels like too scary. Let him show you. Yeah, he doesn't look at our past. He already knows everything that we're meant to be. There's something that I want us to understand about why we kind of pull back to those old patterns so strongly. Okay? I know you hear me say this all the time, but I keep reminding you, and I do it intentionally, actually. I want this so ingrained in you because I want you to feel relief in understanding why you operate in the way that you do sometimes and to rewire your mind. Okay? So our minds constantly scan for repeated danger. That's a built-in survival function. So we're not doing that out of weakness, but when we've spent years in a system or relationship, this way of working that trained you to expect kind of like a certain kind of hard, your mind treats that hard as safe. Okay? It does that simply because that's what it knows, even when it's what's actually harming you. This is why so many of us, we go back to overworking the second that things calm down. Okay? Calm, it doesn't feel safe if you've never trusted calm before. Thank you for that. The familiar heart, it feels safer than an unfamiliar peace. Okay? And it does that purely because your brain has already mapped how to survive it. I want you to think about this in business. All right? I'm going to make this so relevant to business today and to our everyday lives in a way that I can't even tell you when I wrote this and I understood the through line of where we were going today. I said, God, I feel like this was written for exactly the place that you've called me to talk on, like to speak about, because I've lived it to the fullest. Well, maybe not to the fullest, but in depth, I should say. Okay? I want you to think about this. Think about what it looks like running a business. So for some of us, our Egypt, right, our old way of operating, the awful way of operating, the thing that was hard for us, it might be the way that you were first taught how to work, right? Whatever mentor or boss or industry standard trained you that hustle equals worth, right? That rest has to be earned. That you're only as valuable as your last launch or your last promotion, right? Your last performance metric. How many of you have been taught that way? I was, right? That's what the world tends to hand us. You're only as good as what your last performance showed. I would have my hand like all the way up because that's me. Your Canaan is different, right? It's not your past. Your Canaan is your present, right? That's your unknown. Your Canaan, you don't know what you're about to step into. It's the current market, right? It's your competitors, the people that are around you that you're watching, the way that everybody in your specific industry right now says that you have to price yourself, the way that they tell you that you have to post or how you have to perform to stay relevant, right? It's whatever's trending on social media. It's whatever everybody around you is doing that's successful. This chapter is telling you neither one is going to get the final say. not that old boss's voice in your head, not this current trend that you feel like you have to match. Just because everybody in your space cuts a certain corner, it doesn't make it yours to cut. And when I see this outside of business, it shows up just as clearly, okay? Your Egypt, your old way of operating, the thing that was so awful or hard that you stepped out of, your Egypt might be the household that you grew up in, the one that taught you that love means keeping the peace no matter what it costs you, or that your worth is tied to how much you do for everybody else, right? Your Canaan, your unknown, it might be your current friend group or the neighborhood that you live in right now, or the unspoken standard for what a good mom looks like or a good wife is supposed to, or a good daughter is supposed to look like this year. You can spend your whole life managing both of those voices. Don't make me cry, Tina. You can spend your whole life managing both of those voices, right? That old household rule or the current social one, and never ask yourself which one is actually true, right? This chapter actually says that neither one gets to answer that for you. So I wonder how many of us have a business where it's like you've had a business that's like Egypt, right? And a business that's like Canaan, and they're both running at the same time. You're operating in this old way that's not good for you. And you have this new unknown territory, and they're both running at the same time. You want to run back to the old way, and you're scared of what the new looks like. How many of you have that? I do. I want to run to the hustle. Every time I get excited about things, I want to just give it everything I have. Sometimes at the cost of my sleep, at the cost of my mental health. And this new unknown place, give me 1 second, you guys. This new unknown place, it's terrifying. I don't know what I'm about to step into. It's this place where the old training tells you what work has to look like to even be worth anything, and what the current market is telling you what normal looks like right now. How many of you have ever noticed both of those voices arguing for the same thing? Sorry, my voice keeps going. I keep needing to clear my voice, and I'm like, I'm not doing that with the speaker or with my mic right here. How many of you have that? How many of us have stopped to notice both of those voices arguing for us, for the same exact thing, to keep pushing, to keep proving, to keep matching the pace of everyone else, even when neither of them are actually God's voice? Have any of you felt that? I guarantee you none of those are God's voice. God is not telling you to keep proving, to keep matching the pace of the other people. He's not saying outperform that person, be just like that other person on social media, hit their level of success, that your worth is tied to your metrics, to how much money you make. I'm curious, how many of you have ever stopped to notice both of those voices? The one that tells you, I want to go back. I want to go back to where it's comfortable. And I'm scared of what's ahead of me. So when we look into Leviticus, I'll read through, so we're in Leviticus 18 if any of you are just joining us. Okay, we're in Leviticus 18, and I'm going to read through verses 6 through 18, okay? I'll read through verses 6 through 18. And it says, none of you shall approach anyone who is near the kin of him, right? I read that part, so I'll just skim it. But it's talking about the mother and father not having any clothes, right? And the sister and the daughter of your father or the daughter of your mother, whether born at the same home or elsewhere, you shouldn't see them in their undress, right? In verse 10, it says, the barren, like when I say barrenness, I just mean that they don't have clothes on. I'm not going to say that each and every time. Okay? Them being in the natural. Maybe I'll say that. In their natural state. Of your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter, you shall not uncover, for theirs is your own. Let's see. Let me see how I can skim past this, because it's going to say a lot of the same things. So you shouldn't do that with your father's sister, because she is near to the kin of your father. You shall not do that with your mother's sister, for she is near the kin of your mother. You shall not uncover your father's brother, so your uncle. You shall not approach his wife, because she is your aunt. And you shall not uncover this of your daughter-in-law, because she is your son's wife. You shall not uncover any of that, okay? You shouldn't do that to a woman and her daughter, nor shall take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter. They are near of kin to her. It is wickedness. Nor shall you take a woman as a rival to her sister to uncover her in her natural state while the other is alive. All right? So I'm just going to paraphrase all of this, okay? Because this section, it's a list. And TikTok actually isn't the place to walk through every line of it individually. So I want to talk about it, about what it's doing as a whole, instead of me going verse by verse through it. I'm just summarizing it. What God is doing is drawing a boundary around the family itself, okay? So in the ancient world, and in parts of the modern world too, family structures could be used for power, for control, okay? For keeping wealth and authority contained inside one bloodline at the expense of anyone that was vulnerable inside that structure, especially women and children who had no way of saying no. So this section, it protects something very specific. It protects something very specific, that the family is supposed to be the safest place that a person exists, not a place where power gets exploited because no one's watching, okay? So if you've never thought about this before, I want you to think about this. God is saying that the home is not exempt from his holiness. And it would be very easy to think that God only cares about what happens in public or like worship or in business dealings, how you treat strangers. This section says no, okay? The most private relationships that you have are just as much his concern as anything visible. So in the NLT, the New Living Translation, it paraphrases the opening line of this section this way: you must not have intimate relations with a close relative, meaning to do the deed with a close relative, for I am the Lord. I want you to notice the little tag at the end again, okay? He says, for I am the Lord. It shows up inside this list too, not just around it. So God isn't bookending the chapter with his name. He's threading it through every single boundary, as if it's to keep reminding them, this isn't just a random rule. This is coming from me and I have a reason. Okay? What this reveals about God is protective. It's not restrictive. God is not walking into the most intimate parts of Israel's life to control them just for the sake of control. He is walking into the most intimate parts of their life because that's exactly where most people are likely to get hurt without anyone else knowing. This is about a God who, I should say it like this. It's a God who only if it were a God who only cared about outward public behavior, it could have been skipped. It could have skipped this section entirely and nobody would have noticed. But God didn't skip it. He went straight into the place where the abuse hides best, behind closed doors, right? Behind, inside family structures that were protected by silence. And he said, this isn't going to happen here either. This isn't a controlling God. This is a God who refuses to let he refuses to let anywhere be a blind spot for the people that he loves. So I want you to think about what this means relationally, okay? This could be like a leader who only regulates what's visible and they're managing their reputation. Sometimes it's a father who regulates what happens even in the rooms that nobody else walks into, where nobody else is protecting people that he actually loves. This section is God acting like The second kind, not the first. God isn't a leader who's managing his reputation. He is a father who goes in and protects his loved ones in the rooms that nobody else is in or thought to protect over, because he actually loves us. I think that this section is speaking for some of us today, okay? I don't think that it's mainly about this family structure at all. I think it's about the parts of your life that nobody sees. Like the parts where we've decided that they don't get the same kind of standard as the parts where people are watching. I feel like what God might be saying, based on how thorough he is in this section, that he is not impressed by a woman who looks put together. Thank you so much for that. He's not impressed by a woman who looks very put together in public and then lets everything else fall apart in the rooms that nobody walks into. Not because God's not waiting to catch you, but because he loves the private you as much as the public you. He wants both of them whole, not just the one that everybody else can see. I think that most people miss this, right? Most people miss that factor. God cares about every part of you, not just the public persona. He cares about the parts of you that are falling apart behind the scenes that nobody has any idea about. Law codes from the same, I should say it like this because that sounds very abrupt. The law codes from the same general time period outside of the Bible. Like the code, there are codes in the Bible that some address family and some approach like the intimate private conduct, but nowhere near as comprehensively or as protectively as Leviticus 18. So there are other codes in scripture, but they don't cover it as comprehensively as what we just covered, okay? A lot of the other laws, several practices explicitly forbidden. I'm trying to figure out how to say this. There were several practices that were forbidden here that were legal, even normalized in surrounding cultures at the time. Okay, Israel wasn't given an average moral code for its era. It was given a code that was in several specific ways ahead of its time. Okay, so what's happening, especially here, is how it protected people who had no legal standing to protect themselves. So what I want to get to, like underneath this, the part that I feel like is so worth talking about, is about why the private inconsistency is so common, even with people who genuinely love God. Because what I mean by that is a lot of times what we present to people in public is so inconsistent with what happens behind closed doors. Would you guys agree? There's a lot that happens behind the scenes that people never know about. The things that we don't share about ever. Sometimes even the people closest to us have no idea. Not even our spouses know the things that we're dealing with sometimes. And that's very inconsistent with the persona that we place forward, right? I think there's an element of it that absolutely makes sense, that we're not going to share every single detail of our lives. Some people do. And I think that's because it takes far less energy to maintain an image in front of people than it does to maintain integrity when nobody's watching. Our minds tend to default to like the lower effort options unless something kind of interrupts that pattern on purpose. That's not a moral failure by itself. That's just how effort works, which is part of why this section actually exists. God isn't shaming anyone for the gap between what they present in public and who they are in private. Okay? I believe that he's naming it directly so it doesn't get to hide. And I think this happens in our businesses too, right? It's very easy to be gracious with a client who's watching and short with like a team member who isn't. Sometimes it's easy to post encouragement publicly and then be impatient with the people closest to you behind the scenes. This section isn't like this section I feel like is a good gut check for that. Not because the two are like morally equal to what's being described in the text, because they're not, but because the underlying question is the same one. Does your integrity change depending on who's in the room? I mean, this gut check, it applies the same, like it works the same in our home life, right? It's kind of the difference between like how patient you are with a stranger who asks you to repeat yourself and how short you get with the people who live in your house who ask you the same exact thing, right? I'm probably not going to get as upset at any of you if you ask me to repeat myself 10 times, but I'm probably going to be annoyed when my boys do that because I actually do not like repeating myself a lot. It takes too much energy. It's kind of like the version of you that shows up warm and put together at church or in the group chat. And the second that, or it's like the difference between you being really warm in those places and the version that snaps the second that the door closes, right? None of that makes you a bad person. It makes you human. But this section is asking the same question either way. Is the person behind closed doors the same person everybody else sees? Or are you keeping two different standards depending on who's watching? Are you that person? Have any of you ever had a season where, like, the place that was supposed to feel the safest, it didn't? I think we've probably all had that. I think some of us very intimately know what it's like to have the closest relationships in our life be like the one that has required the most protection. This section of Leviticus, it exists because God already knew that that would be true for some of his people. And so he built this boundary. He did it before it was ever needed, not as a punishment after the fact. Okay? So when we look into verses 19 through 23, it says, you shall not approach a woman to uncover her unclothed as long as she is in her customary impurity. Moreover, you shall not lie cardinally with your neighbor's wife to defile yourself with her. And you shall not let any of your descendants pass through the fire to Molech, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Sorry, I'll read that again. Nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, as it is an abomination. Nor shall you mate with any animal to defile yourself with it. Nor shall any woman stand before an animal to mate with it. It is perversion. Okay? There's a lot in there. Now, when I told you guys this chapter is like me, I didn't mean about this stuff. I should preface that. It's not that. It's just that first part where I want to run to the pieces of my life that are uncomfortable to me. And I'm scared of the unknown. Does the sound keep cutting out for any of you? I am sensing that it's doing something today that it's not supposed to be because people keep joining and leaving. So usually when that happens, people aren't sticking around as much because something's off. And I don't know what it is today. There's something off about this study, and I'll figure it out. Okay? It's good for all of you, and you hear me loud and clear. Okay. It might not be that. It might just be the day, which is fine. But usually when that happens, when people join and they leave, because I can see people as they join in, and I'll watch the numbers. And when it tends to trickle, like when they tend to stay flat and not accelerate, that's normal, right? That's normal. But sometimes what ends up happening is that something is off. Either which it looks very laggy to me, it looks like it's cutting off, or it's usually my audio being buzzy. So apologies for asking you guys. I'm just trying to discern what's going on with TikTok today. It's fine either way. I have you on here, and I know those of you that stick around, you stick around no matter what, and that's all that matters to me. Okay? So what I want you to see about this chapter, or this section that I just read through, of verses 19 through 23, what this one is saying is that this section actually moves through several more boundaries, and it does it very quickly. It's talking about faithfulness in marriage and a hard no to sacrificing children, right? That's a hard no. And it's a boundary around male and female relations, okay? It's a boundary against bestiality, right? There's a lot of boundaries. It's saying no to all of these. I want to slow down on Moloch specifically, because this is the one that most people know the least about, and it's actually the most important one for this section for understanding what this whole chapter is protecting against. So for Moloch, Moloch worship is practiced by the Amorites and adopted by parts of Canaan, and that involved children. It involved, this is a really hard chapter, but it involved parents sacrificing their own, giving their own children over to be burned as an offering to secure God's favor and prosperity and fertility and for protection. This wasn't rare or fringe. So archaeological sites in the region have uncovered evidence that support exactly what the Bible describes. So God wasn't naming a hypothetical horror here. He's naming something that Israel was actually going to be tempted towards once they were surrounded by cultures where this was treated as a normal religious practice. Isn't that it's heartbreaking to me. That doesn't even begin to summarize that. It's kind of beyond what I can imagine, just ever the thought of that becoming the norm, right? I mean, it's not that far off as opposed to our society now. So I can't say it's crazy to me to imagine that. It's just heartbreaking. But there's importance of this being spoken about today. So stay with me in this, even though this is really hard. There's a thread connecting everything in this section back to the verses that we read of 1 through 5, okay? Every single one of those was normalized somewhere close by. So Moloch worship was Canaanites' religious practice. And then certain intimate practices named here were part of temple worship, and it was tied to Canaanite fertility religion. So none of this was God picking at an arbitrary list. He is naming them one by one. The specific things that were considered completely normal in the culture Israel was about to live inside of, and then telling them that this is not the standard. That normal is not the standard. God is. So in the the NIV, it translates part of this verse of verse 21. It says, I need to go back. Verse 21, it says, "And you shall not let your descendants pass through the fire of Moloch, nor shall you profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." Okay? It says, in the NIV translates it as this: "Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch, for you must not profane the name of your God." I want you to notice the reason given. It isn't just that it's cruel, although it is. It's awful. The reason given is tied directly back to God's name. That's the same pattern from verse 1 through verse 5, and it's showing up again. Okay? I'll answer this for you. I don't know if you're just looking to debate. Jesus is the Son of God, and he is God. Okay? Some of you, I entertain this question because I believe that you're actually wanting to know whether you should stay on this study or not. But I'm answering it not as a debate. Okay? All right. Most of the time I don't, because I know where this question tends to lead. Okay? So, this is why it's being uncovered here. That's the same pattern that we're seeing in verses 1 through 5, and they're showing up again. Whose you are determines what you will or you won't do, even when the culture around you isn't even giving it a second thought. Think about that in our everyday lives, okay? Think about the practices and the ways that have just become a new norm, right? It's normal for boys to now become girls, for girls to like girls, for boys to like boys. It's normal for us to not identify with anything. It's normal for us to like animals. It's normal for us to want to be with cars or stoves or refrigerators, right? That's the new norm. And we're wrong if we don't agree with it, right? It's also normal. What's become normalized is striving and hustling and proving and success and showing up on social media and following trends. For going against what scripture has, that's normal. And you're wrong if you don't agree with it or come into acceptance of it. Right? You're the one that's in the wrong because that's what's normal now. That's what this is like. This is similar to what's being said. So if you're just now joining, we're in Leviticus 18. We're staying in this section today, in this chapter. This whole chapter opened up by telling Israel not to copy Egypt behind them or Canaan in front of them. Right now, what we're doing is we're walking through the specific things that were considered completely normal in the culture around them. And God drew a hard line around that anyway. So the thing that really stands out to me, like in this part about, I want to say about God's heart, is this Molech probation specifically. So of everything in this chapter, that's the one where God's protection is the most direct and most visible. He's protecting children who can't protect themselves from being sacrificed or somebody else's idea of prosperity. That is not a distant, rule-giving God. That is a God who steps directly between a vulnerable child and a system that would use that child as currency. So if you've ever wondered whether God actually cares about the most powerless people in the room, this is your answer. God legislated their protection into his law before anyone else was thinking to do it. Because remember, the Israelites haven't even encountered this, but he knew they would. Because he can see what's going on, right? He knows all. And he knows the ways of people's hearts, right? He knows that they're going to fall into temptation. He knows how easy it is to be influenced by all the things around you. Okay? He knows that. I think that what God is speaking into in this section isn't about the specific practices themselves. It's about the pattern underneath all of them. I think that every single one of them was someone's normal. Somebody's accepted way of giving or of getting what they wanted, whether it was through power or pleasure or prosperity at somebody else's expense. I feel like God, he might be asking some of us this morning what we've been calling normal simply because it's common, not because it's right. Not necessarily anything about this specific list, right? Not anything that's specifically on here, but about the pattern of just letting go of what we define as common, right? What's acceptable, kind of based on what we've seen. I think what I'm seeing throughout this text is how, in what I've seen of how this text is built, I don't think that God is asking anybody in this room to create an itemized list of their sins this morning. I think that what he's doing is asking something much quieter and much harder. Where have you let everyone else does it answer the question that only God gets to answer? How many of us just come into agreement with certain things just because that's the new norm? That's just how everybody does it, right? I think there's a simple reason surrounding culture. I guess I should say it like this. I think there's a reason why sometimes in the culture surrounding us that it has so much pull on us as individuals. Even a person who genuinely wants to follow God, sometimes It creates this pull for us to go the opposite direction. We want to pull towards the things that are not necessarily good for us just because everybody else is doing it. It's kind of like that peer pressure mentality. Reputation rewires what feels normal. So if you've ever seen like a behavior modeled around you enough times, your brain stops flagging it as a decision and it starts treating it as a default, okay? That's how our minds work. So God, knowing this, he knew that's exactly what was going to happen to some of us. That these things that we see consistently happening to us, we're going to start treating them as normal, even if they're not. I think that's why God spent so much of this chapter naming specifics instead of giving people one broad principle and trusting people to figure it out. Broad principles, they kind of get reinterpreted by whatever normal is around you. Specifics, they don't leave room for that. I see this happening in business, right? Even though the content is completely different, you know what I see a lot of times? Our new normal, I see this happening all the time on TikTok. The new normal, maybe you guys don't have it, because one time I looked for like a covering to wear underneath like my tank tops. You know what's normal now? Girls just pulling up their shirts and showing the covering. Even though they're not exposing like the whole thing, that's just normal. Or like, oh, they're like a get ready with me, right? And they're just completely in their like just underclothing. That's now normal, right? It's just like, oh, I see that on TikTok all the time. That's just normal. That's how social media is right now, right? Content is completely different than what it used to be. Or like certain practices that become kind of like the industry norm because people, because like enough people do them. No, it's not even the bras. It's like the little coverings. And they'll literally just be, I'll just scroll and she's like this, woo, and just all of it falls out. And I'm like, is that necessary? Now, I get that some of you are influencers. Absolutely. But sometimes there's a more appropriate way. Okay. I get the point. I get where those covers go. You don't have to show me everything underneath your shirt. Okay. Or like, you know what I see a lot of now? And I didn't even search for this, but like the razors. They'll be selling like the razors or like the cream. And it's just like her whole everything down there. Like the part that shouldn't be showing isn't showing, but it's like everything down there. And her in like a swimsuit. And I'm like, that is how I know what it does. You don't have to show me visually, okay? I get the point. That's the norm though, right? We've become accustomed to seeing that. We can recognize that's not, I wouldn't go out and do that. But how many of you would agree that that's just become the norm nowadays? To just see any and everything on social media. It's almost like there's nothing off limits. I always think it's funny when people comment on certain TikToks and they're like, you never know what your next scroll is gonna be. And I feel like that a lot. Never know what my next scroll is gonna be. Because it's like for no reason these things come up because the algorithm is just throwing any and everything at you. And you're like, why I never signed up for this. You know what I see a lot too are those like AI books or like storytelling things about, and it'll just like be a full on people going at it. And I'm like, what is this? And why does this come up every like fifth scroll? And then I click not interested, right? And it'll stop showing for a couple of days and then boom, it's right back at it. I do that. And this like, I know you said you're not interested, but I think you are. That's like what the algorithm does. It just like puts it right in your face. I don't think it genuinely cares. You know what? Now that I said this, it'll probably be It'll probably be showing up on all of your feeds, just like it did to Cindy when we were talking about the, I can't even remember what it's ever called. It's that new, it's whatever's affecting the produce. Yeah, like the strawberries. That's just the new norm. I think about, so if I'll get off that soapbox for a second, because that stuff drives me nuts. I think in certain industries, there are certain, yes, that one. Now you all are going to have that flooding your feed. Even though I'm over here talking about scripture and I'm talking about a million different things, it's always going to be the thing that you don't want showing up to show up. But like certain practices, they become the industry norm simply because enough people do it. Now it just shows you more of what it wants you to see. Enough people are doing it, right? They're over promising in sales. How many coaches do you see say in their sales page, they're like, you're going to have, I can guarantee that you join my program and you're going to 3x your sales. Or like, I'm going to take you to 10,000 next month, right? That's just the norm. They're over promising their sales page. Or they're taking bits and pieces from their competitors. Or they're borrowing someone else's framework entirely and not giving credit. Or they undercut like somebody else's pricing to win a client. That just becomes the norm, right? None of that is on the level of what this chapter is naming. And it shouldn't be flattened to that. But the thing about it is that the underlying mechanism is the same one that this chapter is exposing, right? Common does not equal permitted. Okay? Just because it's how your specific industry operates, it doesn't mean it's how you're required to operate inside of it. And this shows up, I see this all the time in our everyday, right? And things that are so small that we'd never call them like a moral crisis. We're talking about someone the second that they leave the room, because that's what your friend group does, right? You're like, oh my gosh, I can't stand her. What's wrong with her? The second she leaves, why'd she have to make a comment like that? Right? Or sometimes it's overspending during the holidays because everybody in your family does it. And that's just part of the tradition, even if it's like not at all what you can do. You're like, everybody else in my family does this, so I have to keep that standard. Or it's like letting a certain relative speak to you a way that you've never let a stranger speak to you because that's how your family's just always been. It's the same mechanism, it's just smaller stakes. Common doesn't equal permitted in your kitchen or your chat group any more than it did in Canaan. That's essentially what this is saying, okay? So when I read through verses 24 through 30, it says, don't defile yourselves with any of these things, for by all these nations are defiled, which I am casting out before you, for the land is defiled. Therefore I visit the punishment of its iniquity upon it, and the land vomits out its inhabitants. You shall therefore keep my statutes and my judgments, and shall not commit any of these abominations, either any of you or your own nation, or any strangers who dwells among you. For all these abominations the men of the land have done, who were before you, and thus the land defiled, lest the land vomit you out also then when you defile it, as it vomits out the nations that were before you. For whoever commits any of these abominations, the person who commits them shall be cut off from among the people, from among their people. Therefore you shall keep my ordinances, so that you do not commit any of these abominable customs, which were not committed before you, that you do not defile yourselves by them. I am the Lord your God. So this is where the chapter finishes, right? This is where it lands. And it's a strange image if you've never actually sat with it before. So the land itself, it couldn't hold what was happening on it. It's kind of like described as a body that got so sick and it just couldn't keep something down. Okay? It vomits it. God tells Israel, the nations before you did those things and the land vomited them out, so don't be the next. In the CSB translation, it renders part of verse 28. It says it this way: if you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. And it says that it is deliberate. To me, that's very deliberately uncomfortable language, and it's meant to be. This isn't God threatening arbitrary punishment. It's God describing something closer to like a structural collapse. Some things are simply just not sustainable, no matter how normal they look when they're happening. So this land, it couldn't hold everything indefinitely just because a culture has agreed to call it acceptable. So if you've never really connected this before, here's the bigger picture. So back in Genesis, long before Israel was even a nation, God told Abraham that his descendants wouldn't receive this land yet. They wouldn't receive this land yet because, in God's own words, the sin of the people already living there hadn't reached its full measure. This means that this moment in Leviticus 18 isn't sudden. God gave that land hundreds of years to change course before judgment ever arrived. The vomiting out language that's used at the end of this chapter, it isn't an impulsive reaction. It's the far end of patience, right? A patience that has already stretched for generations. I think what this chapter reveals about God's heart, and it's very easy to miss if you only ever read it as a threat, what God was doing wasn't ambushing Israel with his warning at the end of what we're seeing. He told them at the very beginning in verse 5 that his statutes lead to life. Okay? He's like not setting a trap and then springing it on them later. He is telling them very clearly in advance exactly what happens on the other side of both choices. And he's doing that so whatever they choose it with open eyes. That's not a controlling God hiding consequences to catch people off guard. That's a God who's telling the truth before it costs you something. And I believe that he's doing that because he would rather you know now than find out later. The reason why for us psychologically these warnings, they matter more than what they may seem like on the surface. So people rarely walk away from something the moment that it stops working. I think that most patterns, they look suitable for a really long time right up until they're not. And I think it's because the damage is slow and it's invisible before it's sudden and undeniable. That's kind of like true of soil that gets farmed without ever resting. It's true of a body that runs on adrenaline for years before it finally gives out. This chapter, it's naming that same principle at the level of an entire land and an entire people. Think about that, right? This is where to me, the Egypt pattern that we spoke about, where you want to run back to the things that are comfortable for you, even if they were hard and awful, because you survived them. That's where this pattern actually costs them something real if it goes on unaddressed. Sometimes in business, it can be built entirely on hustle, and it can look like it's working for a really long time. And our revenue, it can climb, right? And that growth can look very real, and it is, okay? It is right up until the person runs it, they burn out completely, or at the pace that breaks something over time that took years to build. I want to ask you this just so I can relate to some of you. How many of you have ever built businesses to the point where you felt so burnt out that even though you had success, you knew that you were so burnt out? You knew that you couldn't keep operating in that pace, but something in you told you, like, I have to keep going. You have to keep going. Can I ask you very honestly, and I'll be vulnerable with all of you, what was the reason why you kept going past burnout? Was it because you were trying to prove something? Was it because that's just what you thought a successful business looked like? Was it because you got too far to quit? What was that reason? You just kept pushing past it. For me, I think it was that I had to prove something. Sorry, TikTok was like, there's no sound detected because I wasn't saying anything. I'm just reading your chats as they come in. Yep. These are so good. I think that for me, a lot of it was like, I have to prove that my business is worth something, that God hasn't taken me this far to only get this far. And that because I pivoted away from finishing my degree, that like this was just plan B, right? It can look like all of those things that I said, like revenue and growth and success, right up until we lose ourselves. I'm curious, when you burnt out, did you lose a piece of you? Did any of that make you stop and reset your mind? Or did you continue going? There's no like wrong answer. I'm just curious. When you got all the way up until that burnout point, did you lose a piece of yourself in it? Or did you just say, okay, I need a reset, and then you just got right back into it? You needed a break. I think what this chapter kind of stops on, like there's a warning in it. And I don't think it's really more so about a plot of land thousands of years ago. To me, it's about this plain truth that some of the ways of operating are not sustainable no matter how normal they look while they're happening. And then pretending otherwise, it doesn't change what eventually happens, it just delays it. I've seen this slow collapse happen outside of business too, right? We've seen it happen in marriages, right? A marriage can run on avoidance for years and look totally fine from the outside, right up until it doesn't. And a body, it can run on caffeine and no real rest for years and look fine, right up until it can't anymore. Our bodies can handle levels of stress for years, up until our heart is like, no. I'm not saying our heart gives out. For some people it does. But until our bodies are like, you absolutely need to slow down. None of those things fall apart the moment that they stop being sustainable. They actually fall apart much later, after the pattern's already been running for years. And it happens so gradually, I think that almost no one notices until it's over. To me, this chapter, it's actually telling you that those warning signs are worth listening to now, not afterwards. So I'm going to invite you guys to do something with me. I invite you to say it with me if you want to. It's not required, right? But I want you to say this. I am not required to survive the same hard. Let me figure out how to say this. I am not required to survive the same hard twice just to prove that I can. Okay? I don't have to go through it twice just to prove that I can do it. I don't believe that God is asking you to go back. He's asking you to trust him with what you have never done before. I don't have to do the same hard twice just to prove that I can. I can lay it at his feet. I can trust him with the things that I've never done before. I don't have to run back to those old ways of operating just because they're familiar to me. I can lay them, the fears and the doubts and the discomfort, I can lay that at his feet. And I can trust that he has a plan for me. I can trust him with the things that I'm scared of. I'm curious, where have you guys found like parts of your life that look sustainable? Like when you look at your life, okay? Look at something that looked sustainable simply because it's just been going on for a really long time. Do any of you have that? Like, I feel like this is sustainable for me just because I've been doing this for so long. I think that some of us have been in like a pattern, like a way of working, a relationship, a habit. And it's lasted, and we've mistaken the lasting for sustainable. I've just been doing this for so long, I don't know any other way. It's sustainable, right? Because I've been doing it. No. I used to think that, like how much I used to take on, whether it was in business or like with family, like that false burden we tend to talk about. I used to think that I was the type of person that, like, even though I was stressed out, because things were moving and like growing and successful, that like I could just take them on and that was sustainable. That was my habit of taking on too much. And it was like that mentality of, I'm doing it, right? And I've just been doing it for so long. Like I'm really good at handling stressful situations. This chapter, it's saying that just because something has been going on for so long, it does not mean that it's sustainable. Something can hold for a really long time and still eventually be more than the structure can carry. That was me. I had been doing things for so long, and I thought that's just how I operate, right? It was more than what I genuinely could carry. And it was showing up. It was showing up in stress. I went and got a physical earlier this year. And like my cholesterol levels were high. And I'm like, man, I'm only 34. I don't eat very poorly. I actually eat pretty well. And I work out. But you know what stress can do to your heart? Prolonged stress over time. It can affect that too. So just because something can hold for a long time. Those steaks from Texas Roadhouse. Oh, it's always the steaks from Texas Roadhouse. You're so funny. Yes. Even though it can appear to be sustainable in the time that you're in it, that doesn't mean that you are meant to hold it onto it, okay? Here's something that I want you guys to sit with before we move on. This entire chapter, we're in Leviticus 18, by the way. This entire chapter, every boundary in it, it was given to this nation that hadn't even entered the promised land yet. God didn't wait to see what they'd struggle with and then respond to them. God went ahead of them into a land that they hadn't even set foot in. And he already knew every temptation waiting there in enough detail to name it specifically. That is not a God that's reacting to your life after it happens. That is a God who has already walked ahead of whatever you're going into next, wherever you're headed to next. God already knows exactly what you'll need to hear before you get there. If he did that for an entire nation who was walking into unfamiliar territory 3,000 years ago, that tells me that he's doing that for each and every one of us right now, in whatever unfamiliar territory that we're walking into this year. I want you to think about the relationships, the friendships, the family dynamic that you keep going back to, even though a part of you already knows that it costs more than what it gives. Okay? That's not always an obvious situation, right? Sometimes it's just familiar enough that leaving it feels scarier than staying in it, even if staying in it is draining you the whole time. This chapter, it says that the familiar thing, it doesn't get the final say over what's right for you. So maybe that is a friendship that only works when you're the one accommodating. Maybe it's a family gathering that you dread every single year and you go anyway because it's just what you do, right? Maybe it's even this version of yourself that's quieter or smaller. I'm going to unmute him, Erica. He shows up every day. He just hypes me up. But thank you for that. Okay. It's this part of you that you slip back into around certain people because it's that version that they already know how to handle. Sometimes it's business, right? When you think about that version of working that got you where you're at right now, whatever that looked like for you, and then if you ask yourself very plainly whether you're still doing it because it's required or it's because that's just what you know. Sometimes that's even checking your phone before you get out of bed. Maybe it's saying yes to something before you've ever even thought it through, or explaining yourself to someone who never even asked you to. Pricing yourself the way you did in year one because you're scared of what happens when you change. When you change your prices to charge what you're actually worth. None of those are neutral habits. They're old survival strategies, and they have been running long enough, long after the actual damage is gone. There's also a Canaan version of this that I feel like is worth naming separately. That's not an old habit I don't believe that's an old habit that you were trained into, okay? It's that current pull to keep the pace of whatever your specific industry says is normal right now, okay? The price points, the content, the launch strategies. Egypt, it asks you to keep doing what you've always done. But Canaan, it asks you to start doing what everyone else around you is currently doing. This chapter, it says neither voice gets to set your standard, only God does. That's what this chapter is about. It's asking you, please don't do what you've always done if it's hurting you. Don't run back to those old ways. And also don't just start doing what everybody else around you is currently doing just because they're doing it. None of those things are Him. None of those voices get priority. Only He does. Keep your eyes on Him. Don't look back at your past, and don't look around you at what everybody else is doing. Focus on Him. Okay? That's really what today is about. There's a couple quick things that I want you all to walk away with, because I think they're going to make the rest of this, the rest of your weekend, the rest of today feel a little bit more, okay? That phrase from verse 5, which if a man do, he shall live in them, it doesn't just sit here in Leviticus. Centuries later, the prophet Ezekiel, he repeats it almost word for word, and he does it centuries after this. Then Paul quotes it again in Romans in the middle of a completely different conversation about faith and law. There are 3 different writers, 3 different moments in Scripture, and all of them are circling back to this one line. They're circling back to it because it's actually asking one of the biggest questions in the whole Bible. Does keeping the law give you life, or does life come from somewhere else? We know that is I know, Chad is very quiet today. That is a conversation for another day. But I wanted you to know that this verse, it doesn't just live here. It echoes all the way into the New Testament. And remember that detail that I gave you from Genesis where God tells Abraham that the judgment on the land isn't happening yet because the sin of the people here, it hasn't reached its full measure? That's centuries of patience before this chapter warning ever gets spoken. So if God gave an entire pagan nation that much time before judgment, I think it's very safe to say that He's not in a hurry to give up on you either. Okay. So remember at the beginning of this live, I know that not all of you have been here since the beginning. Actually, how many of you have been on here since the beginning? And if you just watch from behind the scenes, can you guys answer that too? You can just pop in for this one time. It stayed pretty steady at like 170. And I'm just curious how many of you have been here since Exodus. I love that. When I say since the beginning, I mean the beginning of today, the beginning of the live today, so I can go back into this question. I love that, Kat. You've been here since Monday. What a gift. So at the beginning of this live, I asked you to pick one. Okay. Were you exhausted doing what you know? Were you spinning because you didn't know what to do? Or were you scared to stop? Remember I asked you all that? I'm curious now. Does your answer mean something different to you now than what it did like a little over an hour ago, 2 hours ago? Does it mean anything different? I ask you that because now you know that the reason isn't really about whether work is hard. It's about which hard you actually trust. Trust enough to walk into. Okay. So we're going to dive deeper into this because today is Friday and we're going to do our little mini session after this study. I got to figure out a name for it. Okay. What we're going to be talking about here in just a little bit is the hard that you already know how to survive. It corresponds to what we're talking about today, but we're going to dive into it deeper. Okay. We're going to move into our prayer. So I invite you all to put your just one word into the chat. The thing that you're praying for as we go into the weekend. And if this is your first time being on this live, I have a gift I say that I'm running back into my old train of thought. For each of you, there is a gift today. It is new. How many of you are new and this is your first time that you've ever watched this live today? We want to welcome you into this. I want to get to know you by name. So many of you show up time and time again. I invite you back, and it is a gift that you decided to stay. Okay, I know there's a million other things that you could have been doing in your day, and the fact that you decided to stay here, that means a lot. I'd love to get to know you by name. We also have our Discord chat. This one's for the ladies. It's a Discord chat where us women chat about business, we talk about faith, we bounce questions off one another, we talk about our weekend. It's just friends. Just friends chatting. It's a space for us to pray over one another. If any of you would like that, at the bottom left of your screen, you can DM me. I don't just send it out to anybody. I make sure that they're real for as much as I can. And I make sure that they're women. Yeah. We're sisters in Christ. Yes. So if any of you want that, message me like Discord and I'll send you the link for that. But my gift to each and every one of you is this new offer. I don't want to say offering like a business offering. It's just a new invitation to take a look at some of the things that you've been doing in your business and seeing underneath them. What is that foundation that you've laid? So that gift is what has your business been growing from? And if you click on that, I will get that sent out to you. I want to ask some of you, if you clicked on that and you filled out the form, did any of you get it via email? I forgot to ask you. Thank you for that. You did get the email, Cindy? I know that you did it yesterday because I asked you to test it I want to know for those of you that did it today. Did you fill out the form, Cindy, and you got the email today? I just want to make sure you all are getting it. I know I can go back in and check. I just wanted to make sure. You signed up too. Did you get the email, Erica? Because I have the automation that I use was being so frustrating. It's not like working like it's supposed to be. Okay. Thank you, Erica. I did also want to tell you this too. For those of you that opt into getting text messages, compliance is still reviewing it. And so once it's approved, I will send you all a text to let you know. But some of you opted in to getting text reminders about our Bible studies, about our prayer calls, all of those things, because we're just trying to find other ways for us to stay connected, and it's still getting approved. So there's a reason why you haven't received a text from me yet if you've opted into it. You know what? I'm almost at 30,000 followers. And I was like, it's usually right when I'm on the cusp of it that TikTok likes to make it a slow day. There are days where I'll get like hundreds coming in, and then it'll be a slow day when I don't break 100. And it's like, ugh. Stormy, if you send me your email, I can get you back in. I know that sometimes that happens unintentionally. Yeah. You know what? It is a gift, each and every one of you that decides to follow along. So I was asking you all as you're coming in to put your prayer requests in the chat. And if you missed the Bible study portion of this, that is okay. I send out the replays each and every day. Yes, God out-controls them. That's why I don't ever worry. Because I genuinely believe who needs to be on this live, He will make it happen. He will make it happen. They will find a way. So we'll pray out this portion and then we'll get into our deeper dive. Today's topic is the hard that you already know how to survive. Okay, so if you just joined at the tail end of the Bible study portion of it, stay for this part because it's very relevant. But then I invite you in to go watch the replays of the study today. Okay, so I'll pray out the Bible study and I invite you all to stay for this portion because it's very relevant. Okay, Heavenly Father, I thank you for this morning. Thank you for showing us more of who you are, showing us that the places that we've left, that we don't have to run back to them just because they're familiar. That you walked us out of those seasons for a reason. That the places that we feel nervous or scared or fearful to step into, you have already made a way. That you've already set up provision. That you already knew how we would feel even before we went into it. All the things that we would encounter. That you have laid out something in Scripture that shows us that we are not to conform to the ways of the world. That we are not to be that we are not to conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of our mind. That we are to be in the perfect will of your plan, Father. So that it aligns with the good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Thank you for going before us and seeing every threat. Thank you for giving us eyes to see. Father, as we navigate these things, please highlight in the ways that we may be deceived. The things that we may have come into agreement with unknowingly. Please give us strength to walk in obedience. Please highlight the things that we are struggling with, that are not in alignment with your will. We know in our weakness your strength is made perfect. Thank you for being a good Father to us. Thank you for being our protector. I know that you see everything that we're struggling with today as it comes through in the comments, whether we're praying for ourselves, loved ones, restoration of relationships, marriages, grieving the loss, whether it is of someone or a relationship. finances, breakthroughs, whatever that looks like, Father. I pray that you continue to stay near to us and we draw closer to you, that we surrender it and lay it all at your feet. In Jesus' mighty name I pray. Amen. All right. So we're going to get into the second half of it. Okay. So this, again, if you guys are just coming in, this is going to be about the hard that you already know how to survive. We just did our Bible study portion. It's relevant to everything that we're doing here. I go live Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. Central. I usually go live for about 2 hours. I pray that those of you that aren't staying on this part, you have a beautiful weekend, and I will see you on Monday. Okay? But for those of you that are staying, I'm curious, how many of you are business owners or leaders? So what we're going to be talking about today is the idea of knowing the thing that we're supposed to keep doing, even if it's not good for us anymore. Okay? That's where we're going to be at today. So if you guys give me 1 second, at the bottom left of your screen, there is a gold icon. I'm going to invite you guys to click on that. And give me 1 second. For some reason, I can't find what I'm talking about today. I can't find it anywhere here. Give me 1 second. I'm going to search for it. I want to know what business you all have. Stephanie, you said you want to start a business. And Nay, you're the founder and CEO. Oh, that's awesome. Is it a restaurant or is it like a do you sell in like retail stores? What does that look like? I want to know what business you all have. Sorry, my mouse is like not working at all, which is part of the reason why I'm struggling so much today, trying to find this thing. Oh, wow. How long have you been doing that, Marie? You remodel houses. You create access to markets. Oh, it went away. Sorry, I didn't see the full thing. Still with the mouse. I know I need to get a new one. Don't judge me, Erica. I keep forgetting. Okay. Oh, that's awesome. Okay, keep your businesses coming in. I want to say this, okay? How many of you feel like there's a part where you're still like hustling and still trying to survive? Nobody's necessarily even asking you to do it. It's just what you've been doing because that's just how you survive, right? I think a lot of times too, there's this part in all of that where it just feels like it's just a piece of how we've learned to operate. So we don't even know how to operate in any other way other than that. I feel like what ends up happening is it's exactly what we talked about in Leviticus. It's just become the new norm, right? It's so easy for us to default into that way because how else do you run a business, right? How else do you run a business unless you are consistently go, 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 right? Now, as we go through this today, I don't want you to think that it's something that you can't ever work hard, okay? I don't want that to be the thing that you take away from here. It's the idea that it's more centered around the idea of why are we doing it? Where is it coming from? Are we running in that mode because somebody told us that we had to? Are we trying to prove something? I know I asked you guys as we were in the live a little bit earlier, and for some of you that have joined a little bit later, you may not know what I'm talking about, but I asked you a little bit earlier if it was based on the idea. I'm going to move my keyboard over here because my stuff is not popping up and it's driving me nuts. Is it centered around wanting to prove your worth? Like, why do we tend to default to things in business, especially when it is not good for us? What are we trying to prove? Right? I asked some of you all that. I know for myself, when I first started my business, I had massive success right away when I pivoted into what I was doing. And it was one of those things where it felt like really good. I was following somebody else's framework. I was going into this mode where I was like, how else do you run a business, right? That's just what hustle is. And I do want to say that there are some seasons that are going to require more from you. But I think it's a heart posture underneath it. So I want you to think of this question just for a second, okay? I want you to think of the thing that you're doing maybe right now in your business, in your life. This thing that you're doing, that's not somebody actually forcing it on you. Like, you don't have bills piling up. You don't have expectations from loved ones telling you that if you're failing, you're not good enough. There's no deadlines, no clients demanding anything, no emergency. But for some reason, you're still operating in that mode. Okay? I want you to hold on to that thought because we're going to come back to that, okay? Yeah, that's a really good thought, Glorious. You overworked because you lacked it growing up. Yeah. So much of what we do in our adult lives stems from things that we faced in our childhood, right? What I've seen happen over and over in coaching rooms, in our chats, not our chats, our lives, a lot of times, and I used to do this too, right? A lot of times what happens is us as women, we get to a place where the pressure is actually gone. We don't have those same demands. And we have things that have actually worked. We have client relationships that are very stable, seasons that actually required that hustling to just be done and over with. And instead of just like resting in that, we go and find something else to hold on to, right? We keep overworking. We keep underpricing ourselves. We do it like we're still building something from ground zero. I think a lot of times we even keep saying yes to things even before we've fully thought it through. I've seen other women do this too, where they have just over-explained things time and time again to people who never even ask for an explanation because they want to appear more credible because they feel like they have something to prove. From the outside, that looks like ambition. A lot of times that's a pattern that's still running long after we've built these things. Those patterns that I was telling you about that sometimes we tend to bring from childhood. I think underneath those things where it really stems from, and I want to say this really plainly because I don't think that some of us have ever really put language to why we do these things. Those old patterns aren't necessarily there because they feel good. A lot of times they're there just because it's what's predictable. Our nervous system isn't necessarily asking us, well, is this healthy? It's asking us, well, do I even know exactly what to do to survive this? A lot of times a known hard, like a hard thing, a hard situation, it'll always feel safer to your body than having unknown peace. Even when that unknown hard thing is actually costing you something. That's how our brains tend to default. And I know some of you were in the study and I talked to you about that, but that's how we're built. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're capable of rest and still, it means that you can rest and still not trust it. How many of you feel like rest is dangerous? Like, I cannot rest because right now, if I do that, everything on my to-do list is just going to fall. Or like, people need me. I can't fully rest. And I don't mean rest like I'm going to go sit on the couch. I mean rest like not even think about your to-do list. Like, fully just be present in the moment. Lean into just relaxing, like mindlessly watching a show you love, or like coloring in your coloring book if you're anything like me. Like resting and not thinking about the million things that you actually have to do. Yeah. That's exactly what has been going on in Leviticus 18, right? God tells Israel right after they're finally free, don't live like you're in Egypt. That place that enslaved you, don't live like them. And don't live like Canaan, the place that you're walking into, because they're going to be two different pools. They knew that is the known hard, right? That's the place that they just walked out of. Canaan is that current pressure to match whatever's normal around you. Neither one of those gets to set the standard for you, right? We covered that. I think the thing that makes this a very real thing instead of something that's theoretical is like the idea of Exodus 5, right? The moment that Moses asks Pharaoh for freedom, Pharaoh doesn't necessarily ease up, he increases the workload. Remember I talked to you about that? And then in Numbers 14, there are years after they have already been free that the people ask God to provide something for them very daily in the wilderness. And the people propose going back, right? They don't want to just go back to him because it's familiar and they miss that memory. They do it out of fear of the unknown. And that fear outweighs the memory of an actual documented horror that they experienced. Our minds are constantly looking for repeated danger. That's the survival function. So if you have spent so many years in this system where you've had a job or a relationship or a financial season, it kind of trained you in those seasons to expect this is just what happens when these seasons get difficult. And our mind treats those difficult seasons as safe. It does it just because you know it, you've known it, you've walked through it, even if it's harming you. That's why so many of us want to go back in. And when our businesses tend to feel slow, we want to default to those old patterns. You know what? God may be calling you out of a certain scenario or a way of operating in your business because he sees that it's crushing you. He sees what it's doing to you. He's telling you, please don't go back to that just because it feels safe. You know what he did with me? He called me out of that need to prove, to strive. He had to reform my identity to show me that that's not where my worth lied. It wasn't in the hustle or the striving or the awards or the metrics, right? It was found in him. And if I continued on that path, the stress and the things that was happening to me mentally, if I continued on that path, any future success, it was going to amplify those things. Have you ever felt that? Have you ever ignored the signs that your body or your mind has been telling you? You need to slow down. You need to rest. Please don't go in that direction. And you said, I just have to. I have to continue going in this way because if I stop, I don't know what's going to happen, right? That is that same idea. You want to stay in a scenario that's hard for you, even if it's crushing you, because going into a scenario that's unknown, that's more uncomfortable to you. Calming down, it doesn't feel safe to you. It doesn't feel safe to you if you've never had a reason to trust it before. So there's a couple of things that I want you to do right now out loud. Obviously, I can't hear you. You can put it in the chat or you can do it out loud or just think about it mentally because I know some of you are at work or doing other things. I want you to think about Actually, I would invite you, if you're comfortable, to put it in the chat. I want you to first name what's like your Egypt habit, right? Something that got trained into you by an old boss or a mentor or a family member, a season of like scarcity that you're still running on autopilot, even though it's not even required of you anymore. What is that? You know why I want you to name that? Because I believe that it's being highlighted. It's being highlighted. I want to bring it into your awareness because God might be trying to prune it out of you. He's trying to get you out of that old way of operating because it's comfortable to you. What would that be for you if you had to think about it? A habit that got ingrained in you by like a past trauma or a season where you lacked, or a coach told you, or a mentor, a trainer, a boss, a parent, right? Something that trained you into this way of operating and it's not required anymore. Like you felt like, oh, I have to go to school. I have to get my degree because my parents told me that like I wasn't going to amount to anything if I didn't get my degree. Or like the only way to have success is to have an 8 or 9 figure business. That's the only thing that determines a successful business. Or like this idea of like you said something wrong one time and now you have to overly prove your credibility. So now you strive. Right? It's not required of you anymore, or it never even was. But for some reason, you're still operating in that same mindset. So if some of you need, like, I'm going to ask you to marinate on this, but I'm going to give you examples. I actually just created that guide for you, and it gives you different examples. New old ways of operating. Like, what has your foundation been built on? Okay, so that's your first thing that I'm going to ask you to do is just to put that into your awareness today. Okay. And some of these things, especially if you look into that guide, some of you might not have even realized that you were operating in that way. And it'll give you language for that. The second thing, I want you to name one like Canaan pool. One thing that everybody around you has done, something that you're doing purely because it's just normal in your industry right now. Not because it's actually necessary for your business specifically, but you feel like that's just what everybody does. That could be the launch schedule that everybody runs. Like, well, a coach told me a long time ago that in order to have a successful launch, I have to like launch these every 5 months. Or like a coach told me that I have to price myself in this way. So now that's the only way that I can do it. Or somebody told me that the algorithm prefers that I post 3 times a day. And so I post 3 times a day just because that's what everybody does, right? I want you to think about that. Think about those things that you do because somebody told you that you had to do it, but they don't feel like they're for you. Is it a framework that you were following from a coach? Is it hitting a certain dollar amount? Think about those things, okay? I'm going to invite you to just, like, as you've picked one of those things, just consciously stop this week and pay attention to what discomfort shows up when you do those things. Like, just pay attention to it. If you know that you're working in the evenings, think about how that feels when you work in the evenings. Does it feel uncomfortable? You just want to go to bed? Are you hustling? Is posting 5 times a day, is that really hard for you? Pay attention to those things, okay? And then I want you to write down who or what originally told you or taught you that habit. Told you that habit was required. I want you to think about where the source came from. And then you bring that question into every decision this week. Is this actually required right now, or is it just familiar to me? Okay. Is it required or is it familiar to me? Thank you, Mary. So that's where we're at today. I encourage you, if you haven't yet, filled out the form for that guide to do that. It's the What Has Your Business Been Growing From? It'll hopefully name some of these things that you're experiencing. Okay. And I do these mini garden sessions usually, well, in the paid community, in my paid community, Eden and Empire, we go deeper into those. Okay. We go deeper into those sessions and then I get to unpack them with you. We do it as a sisterhood, right? We name some of the things that we've experienced. We give our own lived experience. We give our perspectives. We give guidance. You get to ask me questions one-on-one. I always invite each of you to attend one free if you're not in the paid community, and then every one thereafter you can access by joining the community. But I always invite you into at least one if you're not a part of it, so we can unpack those things together. But I invite you at least to get that guide